The champagne glass trembled in my mother's hand as she stood at the head of her birthday table surrounded by family and friends. "You know what would be the perfect gift," she announced, her eyes finding mine across the room. "If Coco finally left my life." The room went silent. 20 faces turned to stare at me. I set down my fork, my hands surprisingly steady. "Consider it done, Mom," I said quietly. "Happy birthday." I walked out, already dialing my lawyer's number. The morning sunlight streaming through my apartment window felt different somehow, sharper and more insistent, as if the universe itself was trying to wake me from a long sleep. My phone had been buzzing incessantly since 5:43 a.m., and when I finally grabbed it from my nightstand, the screen showed 47 missed calls. Aunt Dorothy had left 12 voicemails. Madison, my younger sister, had sent 23 text messages, each one more frantic than the last. Even cousins I hadn't spoken to in years were suddenly concerned about my well-being. I didn't need to guess what had prompted this sudden outpouring of family concern. Last night's dramatic exit from Mother's 65th birthday party had clearly made waves, but as I scrolled through the messages, each one urging me to apologize, to come back, to think about what I was doing to our poor mother, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Relief. Pure, overwhelming relief. The coffee maker gurgled to life as I padded barefoot across the hardwood floors of my small but comfortable apartment. This place had been my sanctuary for the past 3 years, ever since I'd finally saved enough from my nursing salary to move out of the basement apartment in Mother's house. She'd fought me on that move too, claiming I was abandoning her in her time of need, that good daughters didn't leave their widowed mothers alone. 8 years. That's how long I'd been carrying the financial weight of our family on my shoulders. 8 years since Dad had passed away from complications after his surgery, leaving behind what I thought was a mountain of debt and a grieving widow who couldn't possibly manage on her own. 8 years of working double shifts at the hospital, picking up holiday coverage, missing friends' weddings and birthday parties, because Mother needed help with the mortgage, the utilities, the property taxes on the family home. My phone rang again. This time, it was a number I recognized immediately. Marcus Thompson, the estate attorney my grandmother had used before her death 10 years ago. I'd called him last night during my walk to the parking lot, but his office had been closed. "Ms. Harrison, this is Marcus Thompson. I received your rather urgent message last night. I must say I'm glad you finally called. I've been hoping to speak with you for quite some time." Something in his tone made me set down my coffee mug. "What do you mean, Mr. Thompson?" "Could you come to my office this morning? There are some matters regarding your grandmother's estate that we need to discuss. Matters I believe your mother may have misrepresented to you." 2 hours later, I sat in a leather chair across from Marcus Thompson's mahogany desk, my world tilting on its axis with each document he placed in front of me. The papers swam before my eyes, legal terminology mixing with numbers that couldn't possibly be real. "I don't understand," I whispered, my voice barely audible in the quiet office. "Mother told me Grandma left everything to her. She said the house was mortgaged to the hilt, that Dad's medical bills had drained everything." Marcus Thompson, a dignified man in his 70s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, shook his head slowly. "Ms. Harrison, your grandmother established a very specific trust before her death. You are the sole beneficiary and controller of that trust. Your mother was given a life estate in the family home, meaning she could live there, but she has never owned it. The property belongs to the trust, which means it belongs to you." The room spun slightly as he continued laying out the truth. The family home on Maple Street wasn't the only property. There were 3 rental properties in the downtown area, all fully paid off, all generating steady income. There was an investment portfolio worth over $800,000. There were savings account certificates of deposit, even a collection of rare coins that Grandpa had left behind. But I've been paying the mortgage on the house. I said, my mind struggling to process this information. Every month for 8 years, I've sent Mother $3,000 for the mortgage and expenses. Marcus Thompson's expression darkened. There is no mortgage on that property, Ms. Harrison. It was paid off 15 years ago. As for the rental properties, they generate approximately $12,000 per month in income. That money should have been going into the trust account which you control. The implications hit me like a physical blow. All those double shifts, all those missed opportunities, all those times I'd eaten ramen noodles for dinner so I could send Mother money for her expenses. It had all been a lie. Where has the rental income been going? I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. Marcus pulled out another folder, this one thicker than the others. I took the liberty of doing some investigating when you called last night. Your mother has been collecting the rent checks directly, having convinced the tenants that she owns the properties. She's been depositing them into her personal accounts. But he wasn't finished. The worst revelation was yet to come. Marcus adjusted his glasses and pulled out a series of bank statements, each one highlighted with yellow marker. There's more, I'm afraid. Over the past 5 years, your mother has made several large withdrawals from the trust accounts. She's forged your signature on multiple documents to access funds that were specifically designated for you. The number he showed me made my stomach drop. $200,000. $200,000 stolen while I worked myself to exhaustion trying to support her. How? I managed to ask. How could she access accounts in my name? She had enough of your personal information to convince certain bank employees she was acting on your behalf. Some of the signatures are quite good forgeries. Others, well, it seems she may have had inside help at one of the banks. I thought about all the times Mother had asked to borrow my driver's license for errands, all the documents she'd had me sign without reading because family trusts each other. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound could have. What do I do now? I asked, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Marcus leaned forward, his expression serious but compassionate. First, we secure all the accounts immediately. Change every password, freeze any joint accounts, and put alerts on all your credit reports. Second, we need to document everything for potential legal action. And third, he paused, studying my face. You need to decide how far you're willing to go to reclaim what's rightfully yours. As I left his office an hour later, my phone had accumulated another 30 missed calls. But I didn't check them. Instead, I drove to my favorite spot in Riverside Park, the place where Dad used to take me to feed the ducks when I was little. I sat on the same bench we'd shared so many times and tried to reconcile the mother I thought I knew with the woman who had systematically stolen from me for years. The irony wasn't lost on me. Last night she'd wished I would leave her life. But the truth was she'd been pushing me out all along, one lie at a time, one stolen dollar at a time. She'd taken my inheritance, my trust, my faith in family, and transformed it all into her own personal piggy bank, while painting me as the ungrateful daughter who could never do enough. My phone buzzed with another text from Madison. Coco, please. Mom's devastated. She's been crying all morning. The whole family thinks you've lost your mind. Just come apologize and we can forget this whole thing happened. I almost laughed at the message. Devastated. The only thing Mother was probably devastated about was the possibility that her cash cow might finally be cutting off the supply. But Madison didn't know the truth. None of them did. Mother had spent years crafting a narrative where she was the long-suffering widow and I was the difficult daughter who made her life harder. The sun climbed higher in the sky as I made my decision. Mother wanted me out of her life fine. But I was going to make sure she left mine too, and she was going to return everything she'd stolen in the process. I pulled out my phone and began making calls. First to the bank to freeze any accounts she might still have access to. Second, to a locksmith to change the locks on all the rental properties. And third, to Marcus Thompson to start the legal proceedings. If Mother thought last night's exit was dramatic, she had no idea what was coming. The birthday gift she'd requested was about to become the most expensive present she'd ever received. Because when you wish someone out of your life, you better be prepared for them to take everything that belongs to them with them when they go. The pediatric ward at St. Mary's Hospital had always been my refuge, a place where I could focus on healing instead of family drama. The sounds of children laughing even through their illnesses reminded me why I'd become a nurse in the first place. It was barely 7 in the morning, but I'd already completed rounds administered medications and was settling in to update patient charts when my computer chimed with a new email notification. The sender made my blood run cold. Evelyn Harrison. My mother never emailed. She considered technology beneath her, preferring dramatic phone calls and unexpected visits. With trembling fingers, I clicked open the message. Coco, your actions have left me no choice but to pursue legal remedies for the elder abuse you have subjected me to. A woman of my age and health conditions cannot be thrown out of her home by an ungrateful child. My attorney will be in contact. I had hoped it wouldn't come to this, but you forced my hand. Despite everything, I remain your devoted mother. Elder abuse. The words stared back at me from the screen as ludicrous as they were infuriating. I was still processing the accusation when my personal phone vibrated. Madison's name flashed on the screen. Madison, I can't talk right now. I'm at work. Coco, thank God you answered. My sister's voice was breathless, urgent. I need to see you. It's about Mom. Can you meet me for lunch? That little cafe on Brookside Avenue? Something in her tone made me agree despite my better judgment. Madison had always been caught in the middle, 5 years younger, and still living under Mother's influence, even though she'd married and moved out 3 years ago. Maybe she was finally ready to hear the truth. The morning crawled by with excruciating slowness. 2 new admissions kept me busy, but my mind kept wandering to Mother's email and whatever Madison needed to discuss. Dr. Patterson noticed my distraction during rounds. Everything all right, Coco? You seem a million miles away today. Family stuff. I admitted adjusting the IV drip for a 6-year-old patient who'd been admitted for dehydration. Ah, he said knowingly. Those can be the worst kind of ailments. No cure in medical textbooks for difficult relatives. If only he knew how right he was. At noon, I drove to the cafe hoping Madison might be ready to break free from Mother's web of manipulation. She was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth and nervously shredding a napkin. Her resemblance to our mother had always been stronger than mine, the same auburn hair and green eyes, though Madison's face held a softness that Mother's had lost years ago. Thanks for coming, she said as I slid into the seat across from her. I know things are crazy right now. That's one way to put it, I replied, ordering an iced tea from the waitress. Did you get Mother's email about the elder abuse charges? Madison's face crumpled slightly. That's what I wanted to talk to you about. Coco, I'm so sorry. I didn't want to do it, but she made me. The iced tea glass paused halfway to my lips. Made you do what exactly? She's been having me record our conversations. Every phone call for the past 6 months. She said it was for protection in case you tried to put her in a home or something. I didn't think she'd actually use them. The confession hit me like a slap. Every sisterly chat, every moment I'd vented about work stress or mentioned feeling overwhelmed, every single word had been documented for Mother's use. 6 months. I repeated, my voice hollow. You've been recording me for 6 months. Tears streamed down Madison's face now. She said if I didn't help, she'd tell Robert about the credit card debt I hid from him. She found the statements when she was visiting last year. $20,000 Coco. I can't lose my marriage over this. I wanted to feel sympathy for my sister, but all I felt was a deepening sense of betrayal. So you chose to help her build a case against me instead. I didn't know about the trust, Madison protested. She told me you were being selfish, that you had abandoned her. She made it sound like you were really going to hurt her. The only person hurt here is me, Madison. Do you have any idea how many hours I've worked to support her? While you were in college, I was working night shifts. While you were planning your wedding, I was taking out personal loans to cover what I thought were her expenses. Madison reached across the table, but I pulled back. Please, Coco, I'll testify to the truth. I'll tell them she made me do it. Will you? I asked, studying her face. When push comes to shove, will you really stand up to her? Before she could answer, my phone rang. Aunt Dorothy's name appeared on the screen. My father's sister had always been the reasonable one in the family, the one who saw through pretenses and called things as they were. Coco, dear, I'm worried about you. This business with your mother, it's gotten everyone upset. Why don't you come by this afternoon? We can talk through this like family. Her warm, familiar voice was like a balm to my frayed nerves. I'd like that, Aunt Dorothy. What time? How about 3? I'll make that lemon cake you love. The promise of Aunt Dorothy's lemon cake and a sympathetic ear was exactly what I needed. I finished lunch with Madison, who continued apologizing while revealing more details about Mother's plans. Apparently, our mother had been building her case for months, anticipating that I might eventually discover the truth about the inheritance. At 2:45, I pulled up to Aunt Dorothy's craftsman-style house in the suburbs. The garden was immaculate, as always, roses blooming despite the late season. But something felt off. There were too many cars in the driveway. My cousin Nathan's BMW, Uncle Richard's truck, and several vehicles I didn't recognize. The moment I walked through the door, I understood. The living room was packed with family members, all wearing matching expressions of concern and disappointment. This wasn't a comforting chat over lemon cake. This was an ambush. There she is, Aunt Dorothy said, though her usual warmth was replaced by something harder, more judgmental. Sit down, Coco. We need to talk. The intervention was already set up. Chairs arranged in a circle, a box of tissues strategically placed on the coffee table, and in the center of it all, a typed document that looked suspiciously like a contract. What is this? I asked, remaining standing despite the pressure to sit. Uncle Richard cleared his throat. He'd always fancied himself the family patriarch after Dad died. Coco, we're here because we love you, and we're concerned about your mental state. This attack on your mother is clearly a cry for help. Attack. I couldn't help but laugh, though there was no humor in it. Is that what she told you? Cousin Brenda, who I hadn't seen since last Christmas, leaned forward with practiced concern. Your mother showed us the emails, dear. The threats to throw her out, to cut her off financially. No one treats family that way. The room erupted in murmurs of agreement. They'd all been perfectly coached, each playing their role in Mother's latest production. But the real shock came when Nathan spoke up. Nathan, who'd been like a brother to me growing up, who'd stayed with us for 2 years during high school when his parents were going through their divorce. Coco, I think you need help. Professional help. Your behavior lately has been erratic, and we're worried you might hurt yourself or someone else. Erratic. I stared at him in disbelief. Nathan, you know me better than that. He couldn't meet my eyes, and that's when I noticed the folder in his lap. The same manila folder I'd seen at my doctor's office last week during my annual checkup. Nathan, I said, slowly, pieces clicking into place. You work at Dr. Morrison's office now, don't you? In the billing department. His face flushed red, but before he could respond, the front door opened, and Mother swept in like she was arriving at her own coronation. She'd dressed for the occasion in her best black dress, the one she usually saved for funerals, complete with a pearl necklace I'd bought her for her 60th birthday. "Oh, Coco," she sighed dramatically, pressing a hand to her chest. "I hoped it wouldn't come to this, but your family insisted on trying to reach you." She moved through the room like a practiced actress, touching shoulders, accepting hugs, playing the wounded mother to perfection. When she finally settled into what was clearly designated as her chair, she produced a lace handkerchief and dabbed at dry eyes. "We've prepared something," Aunt Dorothy announced, picking up the document from the coffee table. "A family contract, if you will. A promise that binds us all together." She began reading, and with each word my disbelief grew. The contract demanded that I continue providing financial support to Mother, that I apologize publicly for my outburst at her birthday party, that I seek counseling for my anger issues, and that I grant Mother power of attorney over my financial affairs for my own protection. "You can't be serious," I said when she finished. "Sign it, Coco," Mother said quietly, her voice carrying that dangerous undertone I remembered from childhood. "Sign it, or lose your family forever. Every person in this room will cut you off completely. You'll be alone, just like you've always feared." I looked around the room at faces I'd known my entire life. Aunts who'd celebrated my nursing school graduation, cousins who danced at my friends' weddings, uncles who'd taught me to ride a bike. All of them staring at me with varying degrees of disappointment and disdain. "Before I sign anything," I said carefully, "I'd like to know what Mother told you about why I left her party." "You humiliated her," Cousin Janet piped up. "In front of everyone, on her birthday." And what did she say? What were her exact words that prompted me to leave? Silence fell over the room. Mother's practiced composure slipped for just a moment. "That doesn't matter," she said quickly. "What matters is fixing this family," she said. I continued, my voice growing stronger, that the best birthday gift would be if I left her life. Those were her exact words, in front of everyone. "You're twisting things," Mother protested, but I caught the glances exchanged between some family members. "Nathan," I said, turning to face him directly, "that folder in your lap, is that my medical records from Dr. Morrison's office?" The room's attention shifted to him. He squirmed under the scrutiny, his face now bright red. Your mother was worried." "You gave her my private medical records," I pressed. "That's a HIPAA violation. You could lose your job, face criminal charges." "She's family," he protested weakly. "And that makes it legal." I pulled out my phone. "Should we call Dr. Morrison now and ask his opinion?" Mother stood abruptly. "This is exactly the kind of aggressive behavior we're talking about, threatening your own cousin." "No," I said firmly. "This is me refusing to be manipulated anymore. You want to know the truth? Ask Mother about Grandma's trust. Ask her about the rental properties she's been collecting income from while I paid a non-existent mortgage. Ask her about the $200,000 she stole." The room erupted in confusion and denials. Mother's voice rose above them all, painting me as delusional, claiming I was having some kind of breakdown. But I saw doubt creeping into some faces, particularly Aunt Dorothy's. "If I'm lying," I challenged, "then Mother won't mind if we call Marcus Thompson right now. He's Grandma's estate attorney. He has all the documentation." Mother's face went pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. "This is ridiculous. I won't stand here and be attacked by my own daughter." She started for the door, but Uncle Richard blocked her path. "Now hold on, Evelyn. If Coco's making these accusations, maybe we should hear her out." "I've heard enough." Mother spat her mask, finally slipping completely. "You want to believe her lies over me, fine. But when she ends up alone and penniless, don't come crying to me." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Several family members looked uncomfortable now, the seeds of doubt visibly taking root. But Mother wasn't finished. She turned to face me one last time, her eyes cold as winter. "You think you're so smart, don't you? Well, let's see how smart you feel when everyone knows what kind of person you really are." She stormed out, leaving behind a room full of confused relatives and an unsigned contract that now seemed more like evidence of conspiracy than family concern. Nathan quietly slipped out during the chaos, taking my stolen medical records with him. Others began to murmur among themselves, the carefully orchestrated intervention falling apart at the seams. I stayed long enough to give Aunt Dorothy Marcus Thompson's phone number, then left them to sort through the wreckage of Mother's lies. As I drove home, I realized the full extent of what I was up against. This wasn't just about money anymore. Mother had weaponized our entire family against me, turned them into unwitting accomplices in her campaign to control me. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd pushed too hard, demanded too much, and in doing so, she'd revealed her hand to people who were finally starting to question her version of events. The truth has a way of seeping through cracks in even the most carefully constructed lies. My phone buzzed with a text from Madison. "Mom's lost it. She's calling everyone saying you're trying to destroy her. What really happened with Grandma's trust?" For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a glimmer of hope. Madison was asking questions. Others would follow. Mother had wanted me out of her life, but in trying to destroy me, she might just end up destroying herself. The rain drumming against my apartment windows matched my mood perfectly as I sorted through the boxes I'd been avoiding for years. After yesterday's disastrous family intervention, I'd decided it was time to pack away the remnants of my father's life that still cluttered my spare room. Mother had insisted I take them when I moved out, claiming the memories were too painful for her to bear. Now I wondered if there had been another reason she wanted them out of her house. My father had been a meticulous man, an accountant who believed in documenting everything. His home office files had been transferred to these boxes after his death, and I'd been too grief-stricken to go through them properly. 8 years later, surrounded by coffee-stained folders and faded receipts, I was finally ready to face the task. The third box yielded unexpected treasure. Tucked between tax returns from 15 years ago and warranties for appliances long since discarded, I found a small USB drive taped to the inside of a folder labeled Insurance Policies. My heart skipped as I recognized Dad's handwriting on a sticky note attached to it, for Coco. "When you need the truth." My laptop seemed to take forever to boot up. When I finally inserted the USB drive, a single folder appeared, Evidence. Inside were dozens of video files, all dated from the 6 months before Dad's death. I clicked on the first one, dated January 15th, 8 years ago. Dad's face filled the screen, gaunt from his illness, but his eyes still sharp with intelligence. He was sitting in his hospital bed, the same one we'd set up in the guest room when he became too weak to climb stairs. "Coco, if you're watching this, it means I'm gone, and your mother has likely shown her true colors." His voice was weaker than I remembered, but still unmistakably his. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I should have protected you better, but I was too sick, too dependent on her care, and she knew it." The next clip was dated a week later. This time, Dad wasn't alone. Mother's voice could be heard off camera, and Dad had positioned the laptop to capture both their reflections in the mirror on the opposite wall. "Sign it, Harold." Mother's voice was cold, businesslike. "The power of attorney forms. It's just a formality. These give you control of everything, Evelyn. The trust, the properties, even Coco's inheritance from Mom. Which is exactly what we need right now. The medical bills aren't going to pay themselves. Besides, you'll be fine. This is just temporary." Dad's reflection showed him hesitating, pen in hand. "Promise me Coco will be taken care of. She's worked so hard, given up so much to help us." "Of course." Mother's voice turned honeyed. "She's my daughter too. I'd never do anything to hurt her." The way she said it even 8 years later sent chills down my spine. Dad signed the papers, his hand shaking from weakness or perhaps doubt. The third video was a bombshell. Dad had recorded a meeting between Mother and someone I recognized with a shock, Frank Garrison, Dad's business partner at the accounting firm they'd run together for 20 years. The timestamp showed it was 3 in the morning. Dad must have heard them talking and started recording from his bed. "The transfer needs to happen before he gets any worse," Frank was saying. "If he dies before we move the clients, there'll be too many questions." "He's hanging on longer than expected," Mother replied, and there was an edge of frustration in her voice that made my stomach turn. "The doctors said weeks, but it's been months." "Evelyn, we can't wait much longer. People at the firm are starting to notice discrepancies. That audit you did last year, some of those numbers don't add up." "Those numbers are fine," Mother snapped. "I've been moving money for 5 years and no one's noticed. A little here, a little there. Harold was too trusting, always letting me handle the books at home while he dealt with the office." "What about Coco? She's sharp like her father. What if she starts asking questions?" Mother's laugh was cruel. "Coco. She's too busy playing Florence Nightingale to notice anything. Besides, after Harold's gone, I'll make sure she's too grief-stricken to think straight. A few well-placed comments about debt, some tears about losing the house, and she'll be begging to help poor widowed Mother." I had to pause the video, my hands shaking so badly I could barely click the mouse. 5 years. She'd been stealing for 5 years before Dad died. All those times she'd done the books for his firm as a favor, all those nights she'd spent helping with the family finances. The private investigator I'd hired, James Morrison, called while I was still reeling from the videos. His timing was almost supernatural. "Ms. Harrison, I've uncovered some very interesting information about your mother's finances. Can we meet?" An hour later, we sat in a discreet corner booth at a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of town. James was a former financial crimes detective recommended by Marcus Thompson, and his findings were thorough. "Your mother has been very busy," he said, sliding a thick folder across the table. 3 separate bank accounts under her name alone, all opened after your father's death. Total balance approximately $500,000. $500,000. I whispered, thinking of all the ramen dinners, all the skipped vacations, all the times I'd gone without so she could have what she needed. "That's just the beginning," James continued. "She's been collecting your father's pension from his firm. Apparently she never notified them of his death. The checks have been deposited monthly for 8 years. But that's fraud." I said, though nothing should have surprised me at this point. "Absolutely. She also filed tax returns in his name collecting refunds. And here's the interesting part, she's been in a relationship with Frank Garrison for at least 7 years. He showed me photographs of Mother and Frank at restaurants, entering hotels, even on what appeared to be vacations. In every photo, Mother wore jewelry I'd never seen before, clothes far more expensive than the thrift store finds she always claimed to wear. "There's more." James said, his expression grave. "They're planning to get married next month. Already put deposits down at Sunrise Luxury Retirement Community using a joint account. The initial buy-in was $200,000. My coffee turned to acid in my stomach. 200,000. That's exactly what she stole from my trust. It appears so. But Ms. Harrison, I need to show you something else. This might be disturbing." He pulled out another set of documents, these from the county records office. "I did some digging into your father's death. The official cause was complications from heart surgery, but I found some irregularities in the hospital records. My father had been recovering well according to the medical notes. His doctors had been optimistic about his prognosis. Then suddenly, on the night of March 27th, he'd taken a dramatic turn for the worse. The attending nurse made a note that night. James pointed to a highlighted section. She wrote that family members had requested privacy and asked not to be disturbed. The next morning, your father was found in critical condition. He died 12 hours later. I remembered that night vividly. Mother had called me at work hysterical, saying Dad had taken a bad turn. By the time I arrived at the house, the ambulance was already there. Mother had been playing the distraught wife, perfectly wailing about how she'd just stepped out for a moment and returned to find him unresponsive. "Are you suggesting—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "I'm not suggesting anything," James said carefully, "but I did manage to obtain this." He pulled out a final photograph, grainy but clear enough. It showed someone loading medical equipment into a car trunk in what appeared to be our old garage. The timestamp matched the night Dad died. The neighbor's security camera caught this. They didn't think anything of it at the time, assumed it was being returned to a medical supply company. But when I checked, no equipment was scheduled for pickup that night. I studied the photo more carefully. The figure was definitely female, the right height and build, and she was wearing a distinctive scarf I'd given Mother for Christmas that year. What kind of equipment, I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. Based on the shape and size, possibly oxygen tanks or monitoring equipment. The same equipment that was supposedly malfunctioning when your father experienced his crisis. The videos, the financial fraud, the suspicious circumstances of Dad's death. It all painted a picture too horrific to fully comprehend. My mother wasn't just a thief and a liar. She might be something far worse. "What do I do with all this?" I asked James. "Document everything. Back up those videos multiple times. And consider taking this to the police. Financial fraud is one thing, but if your father's death wasn't natural..." He left the implication hanging. After he left, I sat in that diner booth for another hour trying to process everything I'd learned. Mother had planned this for years, decades even. Every tear at Dad's funeral, every moment of shared grief, every time she'd leaned on me for support. It had all been an act. But the most chilling realization was that she'd been willing to let me work myself to death to maintain her lie. She'd watched me take double shifts, skip meals, sacrifice my own life, all while sitting on a fortune built from theft and possibly murder. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop digging or you'll regret it. Some secrets should stay buried." F. Frank Garrison. He must have somehow learned about the investigation, which meant Mother knew too. I forwarded the threatening text to James and Marcus Thompson, then made copies of everything on multiple drives. If they thought intimidation would work, they'd severely underestimated Harold Harrison's daughter. That night I played one more video from Dad's collection. In this one, he spoke directly to the camera, no one else in the room. His words were clear despite his obvious pain. "Coco, your mother thinks I don't know about her and Frank. She thinks I don't see what she's doing. But I see everything, sweetheart. I'm documenting it all for you. She's planning something, I can feel it. If anything happens to me, if my death seems sudden or suspicious, promise me you'll look into it. Don't let her win. You're stronger than you know, baby girl. Make me proud." "I promise, Dad." I whispered to the empty room, tears streaming down my face. "I'll make you proud." The woman who'd given birth to me had possibly murdered my father for money and then enslaved me financially to cover her tracks. She'd destroyed our family, stolen my inheritance, and tried to paint me as the villain when I finally stood up to her. But she'd made one fatal error. She'd kept me alive, perhaps thinking I was too weak or too conditioned to fight back. Now I had evidence, motivation, and nothing left to lose. Mother wanted me out of her life. She was about to learn that some wishes come with prices too high to pay. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp clarity that makes you believe anything is possible. I'd spent the weekend organizing evidence and preparing for whatever counterattack Mother might launch. What I hadn't expected was for her to target my professional life with the precision of a military strategist. Dr. Patricia Winters, the chief of staff at St. Mary's Hospital, rarely summoned nurses to her office. In my 7 years at the hospital, I'd been there exactly once for my initial hiring and once to receive a commendation for exceptional patient care. So when her assistant called requesting my immediate presence, my stomach dropped. "Coco, please sit." Dr. Winters said, her usually warm demeanor replaced by professional distance. The presence of someone from human resources and another from legal made my anxiety spike further. "We've received some concerning communications about you." Dr. Winters began sliding a folder across her pristine desk. "These are serious allegations that we're obligated to investigate." Inside the folder were printed emails, all from Mother's account sent to various hospital board members whose email addresses she must have found on the hospital's public website. The accusations were as creative as they were damaging: drug abuse, theft of medications, providing substandard patient care, mental instability that put children at risk. "Dr. Winters," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady, "these accusations are completely fabricated. My mother and I are having a family dispute, and she's trying to damage my reputation. She's provided what appears to be medical documentation." The HR representative interjected, producing papers I recognized with a chill. My stolen medical records, now doctored to show prescriptions for psychiatric medications I'd never taken, diagnoses I'd never received. "Those are forgeries," I stated firmly. "My cousin Nathan works at my physician's office and illegally accessed my records. He admitted it in front of witnesses. The real records will show none of these medications or diagnoses exist." Dr. Winters studied me carefully. "Coco, I've known you for 7 years. Your record here is impeccable, but we have to follow protocol. You'll need to submit to a drug test today and undergo a fitness for duty evaluation. Until both are cleared, you're on administrative leave." The words hit like physical blows. My career, the one thing I'd built entirely on my own merit, was now under attack. As I left the meeting, I passed several colleagues who quickly averted their eyes. The rumor mill was already churning. Sarah Martinez, my closest friend at work and fellow pediatric nurse, caught up with me at my locker. "Coco, what's happening?" "Everyone's talking about some crazy email the board received." "My mother," I said simply, throwing my personal items into a bag. "She's trying to destroy me." Sarah's eyes widened. "The same mother you've been supporting all these years?" "The very same." I slammed my locker shut. "Sarah, be careful. If she's willing to do this, she might target anyone close to me." "Let her try," Sarah said fiercely. "I'll testify about what an amazing nurse you are. We all will." Her loyalty brought tears to my eyes, but I couldn't afford to break down here. I submitted to the drug test knowing it would come back clean and scheduled the psychiatric evaluation for the next day. As I walked to my car, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. "Ms. Harrison." "This is Rita Chen from Channel 9 News. We received a tip about a nurse at St. Mary's under investigation for drug abuse. Would you care to comment?" I hung up without answering. Mother had called the media. She wasn't just trying to hurt me, she was trying to ensure I'd never work in healthcare again. That afternoon, I met Patricia Coleman at a downtown restaurant. Patricia had been Dad's secretary for 15 years before his death, and we'd stayed in touch sporadically. Her message had been cryptic but urgent. "I have information about your father and mother you need to know." Patricia looked older than her 62 years, stress etching lines around her eyes. She'd taken early retirement shortly after Dad's death, which had seemed odd at the time. "I should have spoken up years ago." She began clutching her coffee cup like a lifeline. "But your mother threatened me, and I had grandchildren to think about." Threatened you how she knew things, personal things. My son's bankruptcy, my daughter's custody battle, information that could have been used to hurt my family. Your mother was always good at finding leverage. Patricia pulled out a weathered envelope. But I kept these. Call it insurance, or maybe just guilt for not protecting your father better. Inside were photocopies of financial documents from Dad's firm showing systematic embezzlement going back 7 years before his death. The amount started small, a few thousand here and there, but grew progressively larger. Each transaction had been carefully disguised as legitimate business expenses. Your mother did the books for the firm as a favor, Patricia explained. Your father trusted her completely, but she and Frank Garrison were siphoning money from client accounts, replacing it with funds from new clients. Classic Ponzi scheme behavior. My father never suspected. Patricia's face crumpled. He found out 6 months before he died. I was there when he confronted her. The fight was terrible. She convinced him it was Frank acting alone, that she'd only just discovered it herself. Your father was already sick, dependent on her care. He agreed to handle it quietly to avoid scandal. But it wasn't just Frank, I said, the pieces clicking together. No, your mother was the mastermind. Frank was just her accomplice and... Patricia hesitated, then forged ahead, her lover. They'd been having an affair for years. Your father knew but stayed for you. He didn't want to break up your family. The restaurant suddenly felt too small, too crowded. All those years of watching my parents' marriage, thinking they were happy, devoted to each other. Another illusion shattered. There's more, Patricia said, sliding another document across the table. The night before your father's surgery, he changed his will. He left everything to you, cutting your mother out completely. She was furious when she found out. But she inherited everything, I protested. No. Patricia shook her head. She produced a different will after his death, one that conveniently left her in control of everything. I always suspected it was forged, but I had no proof. The will was changed while he was heavily medicated, I said, slowly remembering what the investigator had uncovered. She had him sign documents while he was drugged. Patricia reached across the table and gripped my hand. Coco, I've always suspected your mother did something to your father that night he died. He was recovering so well. The doctors were optimistic. Then suddenly, I know, I said quietly. I have evidence. Security footage of her removing medical equipment from the house that night. Patricia's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry. I should have done something. But she threatened to implicate me in the embezzlement, say I was part of it. With my grandchildren depending on me? You're doing something now, I assured her. Would you be willing to testify if this goes to court? Yes, she said firmly. I'm done being afraid of her. Your father was a good man. He deserves justice. After Patricia left, I sat in my car processing the information. Mother's web of deception was even more intricate than I'd imagined. She'd been planning Dad's death while he was still healthy, positioning herself to take everything he'd worked for. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Local news just ran a segment about troubling allegations at St. Mary's. They didn't name you but showed your photo. I'm so sorry. Another text, this one from Marcus Thompson. Urgent, your mother just filed a civil suit claiming elder abuse and seeking damages of $1 million. We need to meet immediately. As I drove to Marcus's office, I noticed a car following me. The same silver sedan had been behind me since I left the restaurant. At a red light, I caught a glimpse of the driver, Frank Garrison. I took a detour through a parking garage, confirming he was indeed following me. When I finally lost him and arrived at Marcus's office, I was rattled but more determined than ever. She's escalating, Marcus said without preamble. The lawsuit is clearly retaliatory, but it'll cost money to defend. She's trying to drain your resources. She's also destroying my career. I told him about the hospital investigation and media involvement. Marcus's expression darkened. This is witness intimidation. She's trying to silence you before criminal charges can be filed. He pulled out his phone. I'm calling the district attorney's office. With what you've gathered, we have enough to open a criminal investigation. That evening, exhausted and emotionally drained, I returned to my apartment to find my door slightly ajar. Nothing had been taken, but someone had definitely been inside. Papers on my desk had been shuffled, drawers opened. They'd been looking for something. A note on my kitchen counter made my blood run cold. Some battles aren't worth fighting. Walk away while you still can. F. Frank and Mother were getting desperate, which meant I was getting close to something they didn't want exposed. I thought about Dad's videos, Patricia's documents, the security footage. Together they painted a picture of premeditated murder and systematic fraud. My phone rang. Dr. Winters. Coco, I wanted you to know the drug test came back negative as I expected it would. The psychiatric evaluation is tomorrow at 10. Between you and me, I think we both know what's happening here, but I have to follow protocol. I understand, I said, grateful for even this small show of support. There's something else, she continued. Your mother called repeatedly today, demanding to speak to board members. She became so aggressive that security had to escort her out. Whatever dispute you're having, she seems unstable. Unstable. That was one word for it. As I reset my apartment's security system and double-checked all the locks, I realized Mother's mask wasn't just slipping. It was disintegrating entirely. The controlled, calculating woman who'd fooled everyone for years was revealing the monster beneath. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight I had something she didn't truth evidence, and a growing network of people willing to stand up to her. The corporate conspiracy she'd built with Frank was formidable, but it was also built on lies. And lies, no matter how carefully constructed, always crumble when exposed to light. Mother thought she could destroy my career like she'd destroyed Dad's life. But she'd forgotten one crucial detail. I was Harold Harrison's daughter, and he'd raised me to fight for what's right. The battle was far from over, but for the first time since that horrible birthday dinner, I knew I was going to win. The courthouse steps seemed steeper than usual as I climbed them on Tuesday morning, my lawyer Marcus Thompson at my side and a briefcase full of evidence in his hand. The psychiatric evaluation had gone well the previous day, with the psychiatrist noting that I showed no signs of mental illness and appeared to be dealing with a difficult family situation with remarkable composure. But today was when the real fight began. Remember, Marcus said as we navigated the metal detectors, your mother's attorney will try to paint you as heartless and cruel. Don't let him provoke you. Stay calm, stick to the facts. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, with worn wooden benches and fluorescent lights that hummed slightly. But what caught my attention wasn't the decor. It was the theatrical production my mother had staged for her entrance. She arrived in a wheelchair I'd never seen before, oxygen tubes trailing to a portable tank, wearing a housecoat that looked like it had been pulled from a thrift store rack, specifically for this occasion. Her usually perfectly styled hair hung limp, and she'd forgone makeup to enhance her supposedly frail appearance. If I hadn't known better, I might have believed she was at death's door. Her attorney, a sharp-dressed man named Richard Blackwood, who was known for aggressive litigation, helped her settle at the plaintiff's table with exaggerated care. The performance was so over the top that I caught Marcus rolling his eyes. Judge Martha Chen presided, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, who had a reputation for seeing through courtroom theatrics. She reviewed the papers before her with sharp eyes, occasionally glancing up at both tables. This is a hearing for preliminary motions in the case of Harrison Verve. Harrison, she began. I see we have multiple claims and counterclaims to address. Blackwood stood immediately. Your Honor, my client, a 65-year-old widow in failing health, has been cruelly abandoned by her only means of support. Her daughter has not only cut off financial assistance, but has also moved to evict her from her home of 40 years. Objection, Marcus said calmly. The property in question belongs to a trust of which my client is the sole beneficiary. Mrs. Harrison has been residing there under false pretenses. I'll hear evidence, Judge Chen said. Mr. Thompson, you may proceed. For the next hour, Marcus methodically laid out our case. The trust documents the forged signatures, the stolen funds. He presented bank statements showing the systematic theft of over $200,000. Mother's performance intensified with each piece of evidence, her breathing becoming more labored, her hands shaking as she reached for tissues. Your Honor, Marcus continued, we have evidence that Mrs. Harrison has been collecting her deceased husband's pension illegally for 8 years, has filed fraudulent tax returns, and has hidden assets totaling approximately $500,000. Judge Chen's eyebrows rose. These are serious criminal allegations, Mr. Thompson. Yes, Your Honor. We've already been in contact with the district attorney's office, but our immediate concern is protecting my client's assets from further theft. That's when Blackwood played what he clearly thought was his ace. Your Honor, if we're discussing criminal allegations, perhaps the court should be aware of Ms. Harrison's current employment situation. She's under investigation at St. Mary's Hospital for drug abuse and patient endangerment. I felt the heat rise in my face, but Marcus's hand on my arm kept me seated. That investigation is based on forged documents provided by Mrs. Harrison. Marcus responded smoothly. Documents that were obtained through illegal access to my client's medical records. We have a witness who will testify that Mrs. Harrison conspired with a hospital employee to obtain and alter these records. The judge turned her sharp gaze to Mother. Mrs. Harrison, are you aware that filing false reports is a crime? Mother's performance reached new heights. She clutched her chest, gasping for air. I only wanted to protect the children. She works with... She wheezed. Interesting that you're able to speak so clearly when making accusations, Judge Chen observed dryly. Court officer, please check if Mrs. Harrison requires medical attention. The court officer approached, but Mother waved him off, suddenly able to breathe normally again. The judge's expression made it clear she'd seen through the act. I'm granting an immediate freeze on all accounts identified in Mr. Thompson's filing, Judge Chen announced. I'm also granting Ms. Harrison immediate control of all trust assets as the rightful beneficiary. But, Your Honor, Blackwood protested, my client will be homeless. Your client has 30 days to vacate the trust property, the judge continued. Given the evidence of financial resources presented, I'm sure Mrs. Harrison can afford alternative accommodations. After court, Marcus and I drove directly to my childhood home with a locksmith and 2 sheriff's deputies. The house looked exactly as it had when I'd lived there, a 2-story colonial with blue shutters and Mom's prized rose garden in full bloom. But knowing what I now knew, it felt like approaching a crime scene. Mother had arrived before us, Blackwood's BMW parked haphazardly in the driveway. We could hear her shouting from the porch, directing someone inside to hide everything important. Ma'am, you need to step aside, Deputy Johnson said firmly. We have a court order. This is my home. Mother screeched, the wheelchair and oxygen tank mysteriously absent. I've lived here for 40 years. Harold bought this house for us. Actually, I said, finding my voice, Grandma bought this house. Dad just lived here with you. Her eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment I saw pure hatred there. You ungrateful little bitch, she hissed. After everything I've done for you. Everything you've done to me, you mean, I replied, stepping past her into the house. The locksmith got to work while the deputies kept Mother and Blackwood outside. I walked through rooms filled with memories, seeing them now through different eyes. The dining room where she'd announced I should leave her life. The kitchen where I'd made her breakfast every morning before my hospital shifts. The living room where Dad had taught me to play chess, promising that strategy would serve me well in life. He'd been right about that, at least. Coco! Sarah's voice called from outside. I looked out to see her and several other colleagues from the hospital arriving. We're here to help you pack what's yours. The cavalry had arrived. Dr. Winters was there too, off duty, but showing support. The board reviewed the evidence you submitted, she told me quietly. You're cleared to return to work immediately, and your mother has been banned from hospital property. As my friends helped me gather my belongings, we made a shocking discovery. Mother had converted one of the spare bedrooms into what could only be described as a war room. The walls were covered with photographs of me-printed emails, copies of my work schedule, even surveillance photos that looked like they'd been taken with a long-lens camera. This is stalking, Sarah breathed, taking in the scene. But the most damning discovery was a notebook in Mother's handwriting detailing her plans to have me declared mentally incompetent. She'd researched psychiatrists who'd lost their licenses, but still practiced illegally facilities that would accept patients without proper documentation, even drugs that could be slipped into someone's food to cause confusion and memory loss. Document everything, Marcus instructed, taking photographs. This is evidence of conspiracy. The locked filing cabinet in the corner yielded even more surprises when the locksmith opened it. Passports in different names, bank statements for accounts we hadn't found, and most shocking of all, a life insurance policy on me for $2 million taken out just 6 months ago with Mother as the beneficiary. She was planning to kill me, I said numbly, staring at the policy. Or have you committed and then control your assets? Marcus said grimly. Either way, this shows clear premeditation. Outside, Mother's shrieks had drawn neighbors. Mrs. Patterson from next door approached me as I carried out a box of Dad's books. Coco dear, what's happening? Your mother says you're throwing her out. She stole my inheritance, Mrs. Patterson. Over $200,000. And that's just the beginning. I didn't elaborate on the darker suspicions about Dad's death. Some things were better left for the courtroom. More neighbors gathered, and Mother played to her audience, claiming I was mentally ill, that I'd been brainwashed by a boyfriend who wanted my money, that I was on drugs. But her stories kept changing, contradicting each other, and I saw doubt creeping into familiar faces. If Coco's on drugs, Mr. Jennings asked logically, why is she back at work at the hospital? Don't they test for that? Mother couldn't answer, and Blackwood quickly ushered her to his car. As they drove away, she screamed out the window, "This isn't over! You'll pay for this!" That evening, as the locksmith finished installing new high-security locks, I stood in my childhood bedroom one last time. The sun was setting, casting golden light through the windows, and I could almost feel Dad's presence. "I kept my promise," I whispered to the empty room. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. When I opened it, my blood ran cold. It was a photo of me at the grocery store that morning, taken from inside the store. The message read, "You can change the locks, but you can't hide forever." I immediately forwarded it to Marcus and the police detective now assigned to our case. The war room evidence had elevated this from a civil matter to a criminal investigation. Mother and Frank were now officially under surveillance. As I drove back to my apartment that night, followed by a security detail Marcus had insisted on hiring, I reflected on the day's victories. I'd reclaimed my home, cleared my name at work, and exposed Mother's conspiracy for what it was. But the life insurance policy haunted me. How far would she go to win this battle she'd started? The answer would come sooner than I expected. As I pulled into my apartment complex, I noticed a familiar car in the visitors section, Frank Garrison's BMW. But Frank was nowhere to be seen. Security quickly cleared my apartment, finding no signs of entry, but the message was clear. They knew where I lived, where I worked, where I shopped. The legal battle had begun, but it was far from over. Mother had lost the first round, but like a cornered animal, she was now more dangerous than ever. That night, I triple-checked my locks, activated my new security system, and placed Dad's baseball bat beside my bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, I'd won significant victories. The truth was finally coming to light, and no amount of theatrics or threats could push it back into the shadows. 3 weeks had passed since the courthouse victory, and life had settled into an uneasy rhythm. I'd returned to work at the hospital where my colleagues rallied around me like a protective shield. The police investigation into Mother and Frank was progressing, with forensic accountants uncovering a web of financial crimes that spanned over a decade. But I should have known Mother wouldn't go quietly into that good night. The text from Madison came on a Thursday afternoon while I was finishing my shift. "Coco, please come to my house tonight at 7. I want to apologize properly, and Mom wants to make amends. She's really broken up about everything. Just family, I promise. We need to heal." Every instinct screamed danger, but the part of me that still hoped for a sister's love won out. I forwarded the message to Marcus and Detective Rivera, letting them know where I'd be. As an extra precaution, I activated the recording app on my phone and slipped it into my pocket. Madison lived in a modest suburban home about 20 minutes from the hospital. As I pulled up, I noticed the street was unusually quiet for early evening. No kids playing, no dog walkers, even the usual traffic seemed absent. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, but I pushed forward. Madison answered the door looking haggard with dark circles under her eyes and her hands trembling slightly. "Coco, thank God you came. Come in quickly." The moment I stepped inside, I knew I'd made a terrible mistake. The living room curtains were drawn, casting everything in shadow. Mother sat in an armchair like a queen holding court, but she wasn't alone. Beside her stood a man I didn't recognize, tall and thin, with cold eyes and a poorly fitted suit. Another man, broader and more muscular, blocked the path to the door. "Hello, Coco," Mother said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I'd like you to meet Dr. Petrosky. He's here to help you with your mental health crisis." "I'm not having a crisis," I said evenly, hand moving toward my pocket where my phone was recording. "Denial is a symptom," the thin man said in a heavy accent. His medical license, if he'd ever had one, had probably been revoked years ago. "Your mother has explained everything. The paranoid delusions, the violent outbursts, the theft of family money. The only theft here is what she stole from me," I countered, but the muscular man was already moving toward me. "This is kidnapping," I said loudly, hoping the recording would pick up everything. "I don't consent to any treatment or evaluation. I'm leaving now." "I'm afraid that's not possible," Dr. Petrosky said, pulling out a syringe from his bag. "Your mother has power of attorney. She's authorized emergency treatment." "That's a lie." I backed away, but there was nowhere to go. "Madison, how could you—" My sister was crying now, pressing herself against the wall. "She said she'd ruin Robert's business, destroy our lives. I'm pregnant, Coco. I couldn't risk my baby's future." Mother stood, her face twisted with triumph. "You should have just continued being a good daughter. All you had to do was keep paying, keep quiet, keep playing your role. But no, you had to dig into things that weren't your business." "Like Dad's murder?" I shot back and her face went pale. "Your father died of natural causes," she said, but her voice wavered. Then why did you remove his oxygen equipment that night? Why did you wait 3 hours to call the ambulance? I have the security footage, Mother. The police have seen it. The room erupted into chaos. Mother screamed at Dr. Petrosky to, "Just do it already!" The muscular man lunged for me, but what none of them had counted on was that I'd grown up with a father who'd insisted his daughter learn self-defense. I dodged the first grab, using the man's momentum to send him crashing into a side table. My phone fell from my pocket, still recording as it skittered across the floor. Dr. Petrosky approached with the syringe, but adrenaline and training took over. A swift kick to his knee sent him stumbling, the syringe flying from his hand. "You little bitch," Mother shrieked, making her own move to grab me. That's when the front door burst open. Detective Rivera and 3 uniformed officers rushed in, weapons drawn. My message to them had included more than just my whereabouts. I'd shared my suspicions about Madison's invitation. "Everyone freeze hands where we can see them." The scene that followed was almost comical. Dr. Petrosky tried to claim he was providing legitimate medical care. The muscular man insisted he was just visiting friends. Mother immediately began her frail elderly woman act, clutching her chest and gasping about police brutality. "Save it, Mrs. Harrison," Detective Rivera said, pulling out handcuffs. "We've been monitoring your communications. We know you hired these men to kidnap your daughter." As they cuffed Mother, she turned to me with such venom in her eyes that even the officers stepped back. "This is your fault," she hissed. "Everything that happens now is on you. When Frank finds out—" "Frank Garrison was arrested an hour ago," Detective Rivera interrupted. "Caught trying to flee to Costa Rica with 2 suitcases full of cash. Cash that, interestingly enough, matches the serial numbers of bills withdrawn from your daughter's trust." The fight went out of Mother then. As they led her away, she looked smaller somehow, as if the elaborate persona she'd maintained for so long had finally collapsed, leaving only the bitter, greedy woman beneath. Madison was sitting on the floor sobbing. "I'm so sorry, Coco. I'm so sorry. When she showed up here today with those men, I panicked. I thought if I could get you here, maybe we could talk it out." "You nearly got me killed," I said, but there was more exhaustion than anger in my voice. "Or committed to some illegal facility where I'd disappear." "I know," she whispered. "I'll testify. I'll tell them everything. About the recordings, about her threats about Dad. I helped her to her feet, this sister who'd betrayed me but was still family. Tell the truth, Madison. It's all I've ever wanted from any of you." The police took statements from both of us. They found detailed plans in Mother's purse for having me committed to a facility in Mexico that specialized in difficult cases with flexible documentation requirements. The forged power of attorney papers were there too, along with plane tickets dated for that very night. Dr. Petrosky, it turned out, hadn't practiced legitimate medicine in 15 years. He'd lost his license for over-medicating patients and had been running an underground operation providing house calls for families wanting to control inconvenient relatives. The syringe contained enough sedatives to knock out someone twice my size. As I gave my statement, my phone buzzed with messages. Word had already spread through the family network. Aunt Dorothy, who'd hosted that intervention, sent a long apology. Cousins who'd shunned me were suddenly remembering what Dad had really been like, how Mother had always been a little off. But the message that mattered most came from Nathan. "Coco, I'm at the police station. I've told them everything about the medical records. I'm so sorry. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I'm entering treatment. Your mother preyed on my gambling addiction, threatened to tell my employer. It's not an excuse, just the truth. I hope someday you can forgive me." Later that night, after the crime scene tape was removed and the police cars had left, I sat with Madison in her kitchen. Her husband Robert had rushed home, his face a mix of anger at what his wife had done and relief that she was safe. "The baby," Madison said suddenly, hand moving to her still flat stomach. "I haven't told anyone else yet, but I was so scared she'd do something to hurt." "She can't hurt anyone anymore," I assured her. "She's going to prison Madison for a long time." "What about us?" she asked in a small voice. "Can we ever be sisters again?" I thought about trust, about betrayal, about the complex web of family bonds that could stretch but rarely fully break. "We can try," I said finally, "but it'll take time. And therapy. Lots of therapy." She laughed through her tears, a sound I hadn't heard in months. "God, yes. We're going to need so much therapy." As I drove home that night, past the hospital where I'd rebuilt my reputation, past the courthouse where justice had begun to prevail, past the family home where new locks gleamed in the porch light, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: peace. Mother's reign of terror was over. Her wish for me to leave her life had been granted in the most complete way possible. Tomorrow would bring trial's testimony and the long process of healing. But tonight I was free. My phone rang as I pulled into my apartment complex. Marcus Thompson's name appeared on the screen. "Coco, I wanted you to hear it from me first. The DA is filing charges tomorrow. Murder in the first degree for your father's death. They found more evidence at her house, including drugs that could have caused his heart to fail. She kept trophies, can you believe it? The actual vials hidden in her jewelry box." I sat in my car for a long moment after we hung up, processing this final revelation. She'd kept evidence of murdering my father like some people kept love letters. The depth of her evil was breathtaking. But then I thought about Dad's videos, his determination to protect me even while dying. I thought about Patricia finding the courage to speak up after years of silence. About Sarah and my colleagues standing by me. About Madison choosing truth over comfort in the end. Mother had tried to destroy me with her final confrontation, but instead she'd freed me. Every secret was in the light now. Every lie exposed. Every betrayal accounted for. I climbed the stairs to my apartment, each step lighter than the last. Inside, everything was as I'd left it that morning, but somehow it all looked different. Brighter. Fuller of possibility. On my mantel sat a photo of Dad and me at my nursing school graduation, his proud smile beaming at the camera. "We did it, Dad," I whispered to the photo. "We won." And for the first time in 8 years, I truly believed it. 6 months later, I stood in the lobby of the newly renovated community center, watching as workers hung the sign that would make everything official, the Harold Harrison Foundation for Fraud Prevention and Survivor Support. The letters gleamed in bronze against marble that had been salvaged from one of the rental properties I'd sold to fund this dream. 5 minutes until the ribbon cutting, Patricia Coleman announced, clipboard in hand. As the foundation's director, she'd thrown herself into the work with a passion that would have made Dad proud. Her transformation from guilt-ridden former secretary to fierce advocate had been remarkable to witness. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the crowd gathering outside. Journalists, local politicians, but most importantly, survivors. People who'd reached out after news of Mother's trial hit the national media, sharing their own stories of family financial abuse, elder fraud, and inheritance theft. Their courage in coming forward had turned my personal nightmare into a movement for change. "You ready for this?" Sarah asked, appearing at my elbow with a cup of chamomile tea. She'd taken a leave from the hospital to help establish the Foundation's victim advocacy program, bringing her natural empathy to those who'd lost not just money, but faith in family itself. As ready as anyone can be, I admitted, smoothing down the navy dress I'd chosen for the occasion. Professional but approachable, nothing that screamed wealth or privilege, despite the inheritance I'd finally rightfully claimed. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind. Mother's trial for Dad's murder had captivated the nation. The prosecutor had painted a devastating picture, a woman so consumed by greed that she'd slowly poisoned her husband while he recovered from surgery, using medications she'd stolen from his hospital room. The jury had deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning a guilty verdict. Life without parole. The financial crimes trial had been equally damning. Frank Garrison had turned state's witness to avoid a longer sentence revealing the full extent of their schemes. Mother had stolen not just from family, but from dozens of Dad's clients over the years. The final tally exceeded $3 million. But today wasn't about her, it was about transformation, healing, and hope. Madison appeared in the doorway 5 months pregnant and glowing despite the emotional journey we'd both traveled. Our relationship remained complicated, but we were working on it. Weekly therapy sessions had helped us understand how Mother had manipulated us, both playing us against each other to maintain control. "The news crews are all set up," she reported. "Robert's handling the parking situation and—" She paused, a small smile crossing her face. "Nathan's here. Clean for 4 months now. He wanted to know if it's okay for him to attend." I nodded without hesitation. "Everyone seeking redemption is welcome here." That had become our unofficial motto. The foundation didn't just help victims, it also provided resources for family members who'd been coerced into participating in financial abuse. People like Nathan, whose gambling addiction had made him vulnerable to Mother's manipulation, or Madison, who'd been threatened into compliance. "Ms. Harrison." A young woman approached nervously. "I'm Jennifer Martinez. We spoke on the phone about my grandmother's situation." I remembered her call vividly. Her own mother had drained her grandmother's life savings, while the elderly woman battled dementia. Jennifer had been fighting the system alone until she'd heard about our foundation. "Jennifer, I'm so glad you came," I said, taking her hands. "Have you met with our legal team yet?" "This morning. They think we have a strong case." Tears filled her eyes. "I can't believe this is all free. After everything Mom took, we couldn't afford a lawyer." "That's why we're here," I assured her. "No one should have to choose between justice and bankruptcy." Patricia called everyone to attention, and we moved outside for the ceremony. The crowd had grown to nearly 200 people. I spotted Dr. Winters from the hospital, several of Dad's former clients who'd written letters of support during the trial, and even Mrs. Patterson from the old neighborhood. As I stood at the podium, scissors in hand, for the ceremonial ribbon cutting, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. Mother's cruel birthday wish had set events in motion that revealed years of deception, theft, and ultimately murder. But it had also unveiled strength I didn't know I possessed and connected me with a community of survivors I never knew existed. When someone tells you that you should leave their life, I began my voice carrying clearly through the microphone. It can feel like the ultimate rejection, but sometimes it's actually an invitation to freedom. The crowd was silent, attentive. I saw understanding in many faces, recognition of their own stories in mine. 8 months ago, my mother wished me out of her life because I had unknowingly become an obstacle to her crimes. That wish led to discoveries that shattered every illusion I'd held about my family. But it also led me here to this moment with all of you. I looked at Madison, who was wiping tears from her eyes. At Nathan standing near the back, his recovery pin glinting in the sunlight. At Patricia, whose courage in speaking truth had helped secure justice. This foundation exists because silence enables abuse, because family bonds are too often used as chains, because financial predators count on their victims being too ashamed or too overwhelmed to fight back. Today we're saying, no more. The ribbon fell away in a flutter of gold, and the crowd erupted in applause. As people filed inside for the reception, I was overwhelmed by individuals sharing their stories, thanking me for my courage asking about resources. 3 hours later, as the celebration wound down, I found myself in what would be my office looking out at the city skyline. The same view Dad would have had from his office, I realized. Full circle. "Knock, knock," Madison said from the doorway. "Can I come in?" "Of course." I gestured to the chairs I'd arranged specifically for comfortable conversations, not intimidating meetings. "I wanted to tell you something," she said, settling carefully into a seat. "I've been seeing a therapist who specializes in family trauma. She's helped me understand so much about how Mom operated, how she groomed us from childhood to accept her version of reality." I nodded, encouraging her to continue. "I've been writing everything down. All the things I remember from growing up, things that didn't seem significant then but make sense now. I want to contribute to the Foundation's educational materials, help other siblings recognize the signs." "That would be invaluable," I said, genuinely moved. So many people don't realize they're being manipulated until it's too late. "Also," Madison continued, placing a hand on her growing belly, "Robert and I have decided, if it's a boy, we're naming him Harold. We want our son to carry on the real legacy of his grandfather, not the lies." Tears pricked my eyes. Dad would have been so proud, not just of the Foundation bearing his name, but of our family's courage in facing truth and choosing healing. That evening, as the sun set over the city, I returned to my apartment to find an envelope slipped under my door. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. Mother writing from prison. For a moment I considered throwing it away unread, but curiosity won. Inside was a single page, her usually perfect penmanship now shaky. "Coco, you may not believe this, but I'm proud of you. You did what I never could, broke free from the patterns that destroyed me long before they destroyed us. My mother did to me what I did to you and her mother before that. You ended the cycle. That's worth more than any inheritance. Don't forgive me. Just be better than me. You already are." I read it twice, then filed it away. Not as forgiveness, some things were unforgivable, but as proof that even in the darkest hearts, recognition of truth was possible, even if it came too late for redemption. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. 7 new intake calls today, 3 pro bono attorneys volunteering, 2 survivors wanting to share their stories for the podcast. This foundation is really happening. Yes, it was happening. What had started as one woman's cruelty had transformed into a beacon of hope for countless others. The Harold Harrison Foundation would ensure that financial abuse could no longer hide behind family bonds and closed doors. As I prepared for bed, I paused at Dad's photo on my nightstand. "Your death wasn't in vain," I whispered. "Mom took your life, but she couldn't take your legacy. That lives on in every person we help, every family we save from what we went through." The last thought before sleep claimed me was of the young woman at today's ceremony, clutching her intake papers with hope in her eyes. Tomorrow we'd begin building her case. Next week we'd launch the survivor support groups. Next month, the financial literacy program for at-risk families. Mother had wished me out of her life to protect her secrets and preserve her crimes. Instead, she'd launched me into a purpose greater than I'd ever imagined. Sometimes the cruelest gifts become the greatest blessings, and the deepest wounds create the strongest foundations for healing. The Harold Harrison Foundation stood as proof that love is stronger than greed, truth more powerful than lies, and justice, though sometimes delayed, is always worth fighting for. We'd turned pain into purpose, betrayal into advocacy, and a family's destruction into a community's salvation. And that was the greatest gift of all. Dear friends, if this story touched your heart or reminded you of similar struggles in your own life, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who tried to take advantage of you? How did you find the strength to break free? If you found value in this story, please hit that like button and consider subscribing to hear more stories of triumph over family betrayal and finding strength in the darkest moments. Share this with anyone who might need to hear that they're not alone in their struggles with toxic family members. Remember, blood doesn't give anyone the right to drain you dry financially or emotionally. You deserve respect, honesty, and love that builds you up rather than tears you down. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and may you always have the courage to choose truth over comfort, justice over false peace, and your own well-being over toxic loyalty. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and remember, sometimes the best gift someone can give you is showing you who they really are so you can choose who you want to be.